I invite the member for Shuswap to lead the House in prayer or reflection.
As Canadians and British Columbians, we give thanks for the precious gifts of freedom and peace which we enjoy. As members of this Legislative Assembly, we rededicate ourselves to the values and traditions of parliamentary democracy as a means of serving our province and our country.
Introduction by members or Attorney General.
Thank you very much, Honourable Speaker. Joining us today in the gallery, Duncan Watts-Grant and Melody Corbett, two long-time volunteers in Vancouver Point Grey. Duncan is the president of my constituency association. Very much appreciate their work and glad to see them visiting Victoria. Will the House please join me in making them feel welcome?
Member for Columbia River Revelstoke.
Out of my glasses. Thank you very much, Honourable Speaker. I wish I could make an introduction today, but it's my sad honour to announce that a man from the Kootenays of great integrity, energy and honesty passed away yesterday. Carmen Purdy is a legend in our region and was my friend and was my mentor. He was without question a champion both in the Kootenay region and BC for wildlife. You name it, elk, deer, moose, Rocky Mountain bighorn sheep, and mountain goats. There was little Carmen did not know about the wildlife by nature and was a fervent conservationist and a master hunter. Carmen loved them all with a personal passion, second to none, and spent his whole life advocating for wildlife. He was the co-founder of Habitat Conservation Trust Fund. He was the founding director of Nature Trust BC. And he created the Kootenay Wildlife Heritage Fund. And Mr. Speaker, man, could that guy tell stories. Whether it was up in a deer camp in the middle of nowhere, up in the bush, or in Tim Hortons, his stories were stark, they were vivid, and they mesmerized. And it was a tribute to what his life was and the adventures that he actually enjoyed throughout his life. We'll have more to say about Carmen in the next session, but for now, I'd ask that this House simply pay tribute to this great British Columbian husband, father, grandfather, and friend to so many. Carmen, you were one of a kind, and heaven just became a more colorful place.
Minister of Energy and Mines.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to recognize the accomplishments of Assistant Deputy Minister May Ma Paulson in the Ministry of Energy, Mines and Low Carbon Innovation during her 13 years of public service, and to offer my sincere congratulations on her upcoming retirement. Since joining British Columbia's public service, May has helped guide our natural resource sector and has inspired many of our current and future leaders. She held significant statutory decision-making authorities, including as the province's 21st Chief Gold Commissioner, one of the province's oldest standing offices that dates back over a century and a half. Following some time as a chief negotiator in the Ministry of Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation, we were fortunate to have May return to our ministry. This is a challenging file, I think everyone recognizes that, but May has always been able to find a balance that continues to this day. In her current role, she was able to advance the Fuel Price Transparency Act, launch a major program to support the restoration of dormant oil and gas sites, initiate a review of our royalty system, and successfully lead her division through what has been one of the most challenging times of our generation. I wish May all the best for a wonderful retirement. We will all miss her dearly, and ask the House to join me in offering her those congratulations on her years of public service. Thank you.
Member for Kamloops South Thompson.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It gives me a great deal of pleasure to welcome to the Chamber here today a couple individuals who work with a company that does a lot of business or a lot of work with the BC government. I'm pleased to welcome Taylor Davis, who's a LiDAR application specialist, and David Mostyn, who's a manager of aerial operations. Terra Remote is the company that they work for. It's a BC-based company. It's located right here in Victoria. And they specialize in LiDAR mapping. Terra Remote has extensive experience in a wide range of other services, but really, really pleased to welcome them here in the precincts today, and I would ask everyone in the chamber to join me in doing so.
Government House Leader.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. It's a pleasure today, and a sadness, to rise to talk about a very important individual in the life of this building and the work that we do, because she is retiring after an incredible career. Legislation does not just happen. It has to be drafted, it has to be checked, it has to be written, and the person in charge of that is the Chief Legislative Counsel of the Government of British Columbia. Today is Corinne Swiston's last day in that position. She is retiring after 26 years of service in the Office of Legislative Counsel in the Ministry of the Attorney General. Corinne joined the Office of the Legislative Counsel in September 1995 after clerking at the Supreme Court of British Columbia and articling for the Legal Services and Criminal Justice branches of the Ministry of Attorney General. She spent time from 2005 to 2006 in Dublin as Consultant Parliamentary Counsel to the Government of Ireland. Corinne was appointed Chief Legislative Counsel of the Government of British Columbia in August 2011. In recognition of her exceptionalism in the legal profession, Corinne was appointed Queen's Counsel in 2016. In her years of public law service, Corinne has been active in the professional development of public sector lawyers and senior government staff in Canada and abroad, both as a member of a number of professional development committees and presenter and instructor of legal and legislative seminars, workshops, and training sessions. This speaks to how incredibly respected Corinne is amongst her peers. She has been instrumental in assisting a number of governments in British Columbia fulfill their legislative agendas, providing guidance and advice that has been most valued and appreciated. I know that the member from Abbotsford will have a few words to say as well, because that's how remarkable Corinne's career has been. It has spanned governments since 1995, and without her expertise and the work of the people behind her, we would not be able to do her jobs. So I will wait for the members' comments, and then I think we can give her the respect and applause that she has deserves for a career, an incredible career, and wish her well in her retirement and the next chapter of her life.
Member for Abbotsford West.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker, and to my friend, the Government House Leader. We would all be hard-pressed to think of a task more challenging and more important than the one performed over these many years by Corinne. The present Attorney General will, I'm sure, testify to that effect, and anyone who has been involved in roles on legislative review councils for the present government or governments of the past would be able to speak glowingly of the professionalism and the incredible attention to detail. But I thought I would take a moment in reflecting with all of us on her remarkable career to share a little bit about the person that I came to know, the woman of strong prairie stock who maintained an affection for that area and for her family, with whom she remained very close. And it revealed itself in the nature of her work, because anyone that had attended, any minister who has tried to shepherd through a piece of legislation, anyone that sat on a legislative review committee that had to read through line by line, she performed the original 3P function, or at least it required that, right, precision in the language, because they are the laws. They are the laws that we challenge citizens to live by. Persistence in saying to ministers and governments, I know you want to do it this way, but you can't. Doesn't work. You'll create a mess. and the patience to wait out those ministers and governments until her skill, her knowledge, and her advice would prevail. It has been a remarkable career. She has defined the standard by which we measure public servants, the faithfulness of her service to governments, irrespective of their political stripe. The best possible advice she and her team could render, always delivered in a friendly, professional, sometimes tight-lipped way, but always worth listening to and listen to for good reason. She once sent me a note, and I hope she won't be offended, as she now embarks upon this new chapter in her life, and it related to a sad time in her life, both of her parents having passed away in recent years. But she was commenting on her father, and she said, "He gave me the mantra by which I choose to live my life, which is stay busy, stay challenged, and stay joyful." She has done that for 27 years in the service of British Columbians. I have no doubt that she will, in the years ahead, in whatever endeavor she chooses to pursue, she will stay busy, she will stay challenged, and she will certainly stay joyful. Corinne, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Attorney General.
Honourable Speaker, I beg forgiveness from the House and from Corinne for this, but as Minister responsible, I did want to be unnecessarily duplicative and run on longer in a way that could have been more concise. Working with Corinne and understanding her passion for the law and for language, I have a bit of a background in technical writing, which I understand is a bit like saying to Elon Musk, you're into model rockets. I just, as a new Attorney General, Corinne walked me through what her role is, what her team's role is, the preparatory work that goes into all of the legislative packages, to see her enthusiasm for it. And I also had the opportunity to work with her in her advocacy for the modernization of this office around bringing technology in, and we did some great work together on that. I am so appreciative personally for her assistance to me as Attorney General in this province. I know the member for Abbotsford West, it sounds like he had a similar experience. The member from Prince George probably had a similar experience. Anyone who served in this role. But I couldn't let the moment go by without just expressing my personal appreciation for her efforts to train me as an Attorney General. Thank you very much, Corinne.
Member for Surrey Panorama.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's my pleasure today to welcome Cindy Dalglish. She's a constituent from Surrey Panorama. I first met Cindy in 2017 during my first election campaign, and she was a tireless volunteer during that time. Then she became my very first CA and helped to set up the office and get it going before she moved on to more adventuresome stuff. She is a passionate advocate for education, and especially in her fight for kids with diverse needs. So please help me welcome my friend Cindy Dalglish to the House.
Minister of Labour.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. I would like to take this opportunity to talk about yet another example of British Columbian generosity, how they come through, band together to help those in need. In particular, I want to talk about South Asian community as part of British Columbians. Anytime there is a natural disaster or humanity is suffering anywhere in the world, they come through right here in our home country, in our home province in British Columbia. I want to talk about last week, Red FM held their radiothon to help those who are suffering as a result of floods in the Fraser Valley and other places. In one day, Mr. Speaker, callers, more than what their capacity gave. In many instances, at the end of the day, over 900,000 was collected and raised for the people to help those who are victims of floods. 900,000, Mr. Speaker. On top of that, same radiothon collected or raised over 200,000 to help Surrey Memorial Hospital. $1.1 million one day. This is in addition to, Mr. Speaker, all the gurdwaras and individuals. They're hiring or renting a helicopter. They're willing to come and help the government, work with government to help those who are in need in food preparation and anything else that they could do. Mr. Speaker, I couldn't be prouder to belong to that community, couldn't be prouder to call myself British Columbians, especially during these tough days and difficult days that many of us are going through. I just want to say our hearts and sympathies are with them who are suffering right now, but I also want to send them a message that British Columbians have your back. They are there for you. Just more need to be done. Mr. Speaker, please join with me to thank Red FM, thank the community for coming through yet again, and our hands are off to you.
Member for Fraser Nicola.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is a pleasure, I'm sure, for the whole House to see a former MLA here, a great friend, Carol James. And I would suggest Carol as a great friend. I told a secret yesterday, and you might want to go and watch my 2 minutes. Please welcome Carol to the House.
Leader of the third party.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, and on behalf of the BC Green Caucus, we also want to extend our thanks and gratitude to Corinne Swisden. The Attorney General's decision to allow access to legislative drafters of opposition parties, I think, was a wise one, and we have certainly taken advantage of that and been very grateful for Corinne and her team's efforts and help in working on legislative drafts and amendments, and so a huge thank you from the BC Green Caucus as well. Honourable Speaker, there is another member of this legislative team who we won't see when we come back in February, if we come back in February, and that's Kelly Dukeshire, a member of the Legislative Assembly Protective Services team. All of you know Kelly. He is very tall, very friendly, very smiley, and wonderful, as the Minister of Health is pointing out, a wonderful basketball player. I don't know if everybody knows this, but Kelly played for UVic varsity basketball in the 1980s. He was on the team that went to the national championships 5 times and won 4 of those 5 games. He is inducted into the UVic Sports Hall of Fame. He was named All-Star several times in his career as a basketball player. And he never missed a game. And I think that that's what we've seen from Kelly here. In the time that I've known him, he is always here, always present, always smiling, always so wonderful to interact with. And I will miss him greatly. However, our Chief of Staff, Maeve Maguire, who also played varsity basketball at UVic, is conspiring to keep Kelly around in some intramural basketball fun. So let's all encourage him to come back and shoot some hoops. Thank you.
Minister of Municipal Affairs.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. I have the honour today to introduce the amazing Heidi Reid. Heidi is the administrative coordinator in my office, but this is only her last stop on a long and remarkable career with government and in the BC Legislature. Today is Heidi's last session day because she'll be retiring on December 17th. Many of you know Heidi. She's been working in this building for 30 years, almost 30 years, and she knows every system and every process, and I think every person in this building. Heidi is known to be direct and determined when she needs to solve a problem, but Heidi is also known for her very huge heart, and she's always ready to help people when they need it. In 1986, she had her first job with Elections BC, and in 1990, she moved over to government. She was truly sold on working in the BC Legislature when she began working for former Minister Art Charbonneau. Art was one of the many ministers and MLAs that she's supported. And as has already been noted, one of those former ministers has joined her in the gallery today, Carol James. Carol and Heidi worked together for over a decade. And Carol asked to be with Heidi on her last day in the House and declined the option that former MLAs have of sitting on the floor with all of us. For me, as a new MLA and a new minister, I have so appreciated working with Heidi. Besides her service to the people of British Columbia, Heidi also has a daughter, a son, and 4 wonderful grandsons. And she'll also have a new puppy joining her family soon. I am incredibly grateful to Heidi and for all of her years of service, as I know you all are too. So please join me in welcoming and thanking Heidi Reid.
Member for Maple Ridge Mission.
Thank you so much, Honourable Speaker. Today in the gallery we have Joanna Groves, BC NDP Caucus Operations Director, Roseanne Moran, our Executive Director, and Susan Vasilev, our Internal Communications Manager. And we really, as a caucus, appreciate all the work they've done, especially over the last year with COVID and all of the things that have happened. And I wanted to say a few words about Susan, as she's heading off to retirement soon. And today marks the end of her last session legislative sitting. Susan's our longest serving caucus staffer, having started in 1992. She was working in the news department of CKDA Radio here in Victoria, where she met MLA Gordon Hanson, who recruited her to work with the NDP caucus. And since that time, with a few little interruptions, Susan's been with us, helping generations of MLAs and staff to succeed as a legislative assistant, communications assistant, ministerial assistant, and in her last few years with us, managing internal communications and particularly giving huge support to our constituency assistants. We will miss her energy, her knowledge, her skills, her fabulous sense of humor, and her willingness to roll up her sleeves and really pitch in when she was needed. Susan, we wish you all the best and send you off with much love for a well-earned retirement. Thanks, Susan.
Opposition House Leader.
Honourable Speaker, I have a second one,
okay.
if that's okay.
Sorry, continue.
Thank you. Sorry, I should have said that before we started. The second part of this is Roseanne Moran. Roseanne, too, has had a long history with our caucus. She worked as a ministerial assistant with us in the 1990s. And this time around, Roseanne has been with the caucus for 10 years, with a couple of years break in between, and she's been the executive director both in opposition and in government. In fact, she returned to us to help set up the government in 2017 with the intention to stay for a few days. Well, 4 years later, she's still here, but we've finally, and we're trying desperately to hang on, but it's not working. Anyway, in between working with our caucus and government, Roseanne worked with many organizations to make the world a better place and has a long track record of advocacy and activism. And I've got to say, she will be retiring. We're going to miss her. Personally, as the caucus chair over the last year, Roseanne has been absolutely stellar in very, very difficult circumstances. And we're going to really miss her in the music nights, too. I don't know how we're going to replace her because she is an amazing singer and songwriter and guitarist and amazingly talented person and a great friend. So please, if we could Give a big round of applause for Roseanne and all the work.
Opposition House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It gives me a pleasure to rise today at the end of the session to have a few thank yous. And first and foremost, the Clerk's Office as a House Leader. They're an invaluable resource to me to make sure that we're always following procedure, whether I like it or not. And certainly I'll let the Government House Leader know, don't worry, there's no emergency debate motions today. But also the Sergeant-at-Arms and their team making sure we're safe and secure, and certainly that was on full display last night, and so I want to thank them on behalf of the official opposition and all of the Chamber staff as well, because they do great work for us. We couldn't do our jobs without them. As an Assembly as whole, but certainly as a smaller opposition, we rely on all the supports and help that this building brings. Internally, a big shout out to all of our caucus staff who do great work for us. We're kind of like the three bears of caucuses. There's the two-member and us, and then the government side. So we're right in that sweet spot middle. It makes us very efficient. We have staff that all have to chip in and do whatever is called upon them. And our caucus staff just provide wonderful support to us, and especially a special shout out to the kids in the basement, because I know they love it when they're called that in this chamber. And finally, of course, our legislative assistants within this building. We couldn't do what we do without them. And I know my legislative assistant is sitting in the chamber today, Shala Robbins, who is perhaps the most patient of all of them, not to single anyone out in particular, but she is here, and she does not only have to tolerate me as a legislative assistant, but she also has to tolerate the Leader of the Opposition as a legislative assistant. So thank you to all of our staff for all the great work they do.
Member for Richmond, Steveston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have 4 introductions to give today, and before anybody is alarmed, there's a reason that I bundled them, and it's my family's birthday in November, and it's just a very exciting opportunity to have a lot of cake in 1 month. To my kids, William, Matilda, Sullivan, I love you so very much. I'm sending hugs, and to my husband, Trevor, who carries so much when I'm away, and I'm very grateful.
Member for Kootenay East.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. As we've heard yesterday, Kootenay East and indeed the province of BC lost a great soul. Carmen Purdy was a special person that had the uncanny ability to recall historical references and stories of the southeastern part of our beautiful province. He was a big wildlife enthusiast and steward of the land as he helped create the Habitat Conservation Fund in 1981, which in part helps restore habitat and feed starving elk during very harsh winters. He sat on the board of BC Nature Trust for 20 years, among other conservation organizations, to being a member of the Regional Agricultural Land Commission panel. His hard work led to obtaining tens of thousands of acres throughout the East and West Kootenays in the name of conservation of wildlife and habitat security. He was the president of the East Kootenay Wildlife Association for 10 years, as well as being involved with Scouts Canada as a Scout and Cubs leader. Carmen was awarded the Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Jubilee Medal, and he was actually awarded that medal by his longtime friend and confidant and former MLA Bill Bennett. Carmen was controversial and didn't always agree with the status quo or government of the day. He ruffled feathers, stirred the pot, and charted his own course for the betterment of the Kootenays. In short, Mr. Speaker, he was loved, he was disliked, and he didn't care. I will miss many passionate conversations with Carmen, and I wish his wife Carol, his 3 children Jody, James, and Kurt, and his many friends across the province the sincerest condolences and sympathies to a great, great Kootenay man. May he rest in peace.
Minister of Social Development and Poverty Reduction.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and it's a pleasure for me to introduce 5 members of my staff. I'd like to thank them, and others might want to congratulate them for working with me for the last just over a year. I'd like to particularly point out Valerie McKnight, Administrative Coordinator, Nina Karimi, Ministerial Advisor, Ebony Rindall, Administrative Assistant, Ann Vabrick, Executive Assistant, and Elizma Perry, Senior Ministerial Advisor. And they're in the House today, and welcome them to the House, and please offer your congratulations and thanks to them for me. Thank you.
Member for Saanich North and the Islands.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to do my best to not reintroduce everybody that's already been introduced today, but what I am going to do is reintroduce people that my colleague and friend, the leader of the third party, introduced yesterday, because we thought they were here yesterday, but no, indeed, they're here today. So my apologies for the time that we wasted yesterday. We'd just like to introduce some friends and supporters, Gail Starr, Brian Charlton, Martin Graham Golder, Michael Madrone, Peter Spinlow, Rafe Sunshine, who I know going back to school, when I was in school, it's a long time ago now, Anka Van Leeuwen, Pam and Richard de Montigny, Pat Nichols, Dev Percy, Nick Dickinson Wild, Mark Neufeld, Waterfall Good, Belay Dark, Derek Pinto. Welcome to the Chamber today. Unfortunately, the dining room is booked and we'll have to find another time for lunch. Thank you. Can the House please make them feel welcome?
Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Well, all of us recognize that forestry is a critical part of BC's economy. We have a number of guests who are here today, and they are concerned about the future of the industry. I want to ask the House to make welcome Henri Mackelson from Campbell River. Henri works for a support business whose clientele is 85% forestry related. Hannah Tucker is from the Comox Valley. Hannah is 19 years old and is a first-year student attending the Coastal Forestry Technology Diploma Program. And lastly, Tamara Meggett from the Comox Valley. Tamara is the co-founder of Loonies for Loggers that did food drives and delivered food to 23 communities and thousands of people during a labor dispute in 2019-2020. I would ask the members of the Legislature to make all of those guests welcome.
Member for Courtney Comox.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today being the last session, I wanted to acknowledge the passing of a number of constituents. One of the things I live by is that I'm a part of all that I've met from a Tennyson poem, and these folks have had an impact in my life. And I wanted to acknowledge the passing of Don Malcolm. He suffered from Parkinson's, and I wanted to acknowledge his partner in life, Dolores Broughton. They both founded, I believe, the first environmental magazine in Canada, the Watershed Sentinel. And Dolores, in supporting him, has been able to continue to champion environmental causes through her magazine, as well as advocate for people in long-term care and people living with Parkinson's. I want to acknowledge the passing of Nancy Reynolds. She lived with MS for decades, and she supported her husband, who was a long-time member of the NDP and was very instrumental in bringing the sustainability lens to our development of policies as a party. And he continues to champion environmental causes. And I want to also acknowledge the recent passing of Bev Erickson, who passed away from cancer. Her husband, Eric, is a long-standing NDPer, has run for nomination on several occasions. He's a logger by profession. He was the agent during international the IWA days, and continues to advocate for people who are workers in our forests. And all of them have supported their partners in life and been supported by their partners in life. And I think that is a real tribute to all of them, and to all those that I haven't mentioned. It's a good lesson to take home. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Member from Nechako Lakes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I have the honour to introduce 4 guests today who are also here from the forest sector, concerned about what's happening in the sector. And starting off with Bill Dumont. He's an award-winning distinguished professional forester with half a century of managing rainforests. He was a member of the team that developed the Great Bear Rainforest conflict resolution. Bill's main concern is the lack of science-based forest recommendations being bandied about by the current government. The second guest I have the honour to introduce is Charlie Rensby, who is a councillor from Burns Lake, a friend of mine from my riding, who's down here. He is very engaged in the forest sector, working in the sector as well as involved with the community forest. On top of it, Charlie just celebrated his 30th birthday yesterday, so happy birthday, Charlie, and welcome to the Legislature. The third guest I'd like to introduce is Marianne Cheatham, who is representing forest families from Port Alberni. Her family has been involved in forestry for over 3 generations, and Marianne is a wife and mother who has watched her community become a shell of what it once was, as opportunities have disappeared over the years. And she's very concerned about the immediate impacts that they're already being hearing about in her community. And the last guest I have the honour to introduce is Rona Doucette from Was, BC. It's a hamlet of approximately 200 residents that is fully dependent upon the forest industry. And she'd like to know how the Minister will support these communities and the retirees as others move away. Will the House please make them welcome?
Member for Victoria Beacon Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I feel like I got all my the workouts I missed over session standing up and down today. I think it's pretty clear there are an incredible number of incredible women in the gallery today. I want to rename all of them, but I won't. Just a lot of gratitude for the incredible women here who I have a chance to work with. I do want to echo my colleague from Fraser-Nicola in welcoming the remarkable and inspirational Carol James, someone who has contributed to this province and my community of Victoria Beacon Hill in an absolutely unprecedented way, and one of Victoria's new honorary citizens, a truly incredible person and a friend. The House, please again make Carol James welcome. Thank you.
Member for Surrey South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Unfortunately, she wasn't able to be here today, but she's watching, I know. And Kamal Dillon's the mother of 4 grown children, a grandmother of 6. She's been described as an individual with a powerful ability to change or to challenge men, women, and young adults. She's a voice for the voiceless. She's been the recipient of several awards. She's a sought-after speaker on domestic violence, and I call her a friend. Please welcome her to the House today.
Member for North Vancouver, Seymour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I'd like the House to join me in welcoming Chief Retired Sylvain Giacomo, who recently retired from the Royal Canadian Navy after 33 years of service, and his last posting was as the Fleet Chief with Esquimalt in Naval Base. He's originally from Montreal and has been living in British Columbia since 1998. He has served on multiple operations during his career, including Op Forward Action, Op Apollo, Op Altair, Op Podium, and Op Protection. And no, you don't know anything about what those operations are about. He feels very fortunate to be continuing to support the defence community and their families in his new role as the base and fleet liaison at the Esquimalt Military Families Resource Centre. Sylvain and his wife Sonia reside in beautiful Sydney by the Sea and are proud parents of Livia and Garen. I ask the House to make him welcome and thank him for his service.
Mr. Speaker, it almost feels wrong if I don't stand up doing an introduction today, since everybody's doing one today anyway. I want to take a moment to welcome my constituency assistants. I have Dick and Lau and Amy Lee joining us today, and I do want to emphasize that they do already have a difficult job, from handling our chaotic schedule to dealing with difficult questions, liaise with ministries, and trying to do our best to making sure our constituents are heard. But of course, Amy Lee, unfortunately, also had to manage my temper, randomly telling me, Henry, you don't need to get angry over that issue. Or from time to time, I say, MLA, did you double book yourself again? Or, Henry, seriously, are you really thinking about doing that? So I'm very thankful for not just having a constituency assistant, also have somebody who's smart enough to remind me I'm pretty dumb from time to time. I also want to take welcome to Dick and Lau, who regularly go to events with me from time to time, to making sure I keep my face mask on, keep my speech short. I'm pretty sure Mrs. Speaker is looking at me right now, asked me to keep my speech short as well. And of course, always ask me to making sure I greet all the individual dignitaries according to a provincial health guideline. So I'll ask the House to join me and welcome constituency assistants as they observe our QP today.
Anyone else? Opposition House Leader.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. It gives me pleasure to rise today to say a few words about our illustrious Leader of the Official Opposition. And no, she did not know this was coming, so thank you to everyone for keeping this under your belts. But the Leader of the Official Opposition from Prince George Valemount has had an incredibly difficult task. This is our third session through a leadership race that is currently happening, and in fact the race seems like it's been so long, Mr. Speaker. I think the current leader will be our second longest serving leader by the time we get to the decision. But Mr. Speaker, the member for Prince George Valemount was first elected in 2001 to this chamber. 6 elections later, she's still here. And I say to this chamber because there was also 3 elections as a school trustee. So at a time where we're still seeing, all these years later, women in politics trying to have their voices heard and trying to feel like they are equally accepted, the Leader of the Opposition was breaking those ceilings for a great many people that are in this chamber today and in chambers really across Canada. She has served, and this is quite a long list, she's currently the critic for health and long-term care and previously served as a finance critic, but when in government, you know, those good old days, just going to say, I was only there for 17 days and even I noticed a difference. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, at least you can agree they were old days.
Yeah. But the member for Prince George Valemount, Minister of Advanced Education, a Deputy Premier, Minister of Health, a Minister of Education, Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure, the Attorney General of British Columbia, and yes, the first female to hold that position in BC's history, Minister of Public Safety and Solicitor General, Minister of Jobs, Tourism and Skill Training, and Minister responsible for Labour, not to mention all of the cabinet committees she sat on. And as anyone will attest in this chamber, I think that sat on a committee, she does not take her work lightly. She dives right in wholeheartedly, as we've seen over this last year as our interim leader. She makes sure everyone is held to account, first and foremost, herself. In 2000, she was the BC Interior North and Yukon Woman of Distinction Award for her work in public education prior to getting elected into this chamber. Now, I all know, like everyone else here, the pride and the tenacity she has with her riding. And if you ever want to question that, call it Valemount, not Valemount. And you will find out very quickly the pride she has and still has to this day, never losing sight of her home riding, despite all of the critical provincial responsibilities she has had. We know full well that her late husband Bill has been looking down on her this last year, shouting his encouragement, egging her on, and lifting her up on those days where maybe the job just doesn't feel quite so great. And that legacy continues on, undoubtedly, with her grandsons, Caleb and Cooper, cheering her on every day. So I'll end with this, Mr. Speaker, and I think it's something I will not do justice, but I will give it a shot. I was never very good at community theatre. But I will say this to the leader, House Leader of Government. It is time for him to stand up, take account, tell us what he's going to do to address this situation.
Government House Leader.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. And I actually think that that is a very fitting way on ending for me to segue into my remarks about the Leader of Her Majesty's loyal official opposition. And before I get into them, I just want to say something, and there's a reason I said that. Because when she took on that task, you often heard in the media, and you often heard outside this chamber, the term, oh, member for Prince George Valemount is the interim leader of the opposition. There is no such thing as an interim leader of the opposition. She is the leader of the opposition. Because she has the responsibilities, she has the challenges, she gets the criticism and the plaudits for that role, which is a very important and integral role in our system. And people don't often realize that. I learned very early on when I came back in 2005, and the member was sitting on this side, as the member said, in the good old days, and that when you were going to ask the member from Prince George Valemount a question, you better know your question and you better know the topic, because if you didn't, you were going to be humbled very quickly and very publicly. During that time, I've had the privilege of working, and I can't use your name, I'd like to at this point in time, and I've really learnt to respect you, to appreciate the work that you've done on behalf of your constituents and the passion that you bring. Particularly, we often see it in this House when you do statements about members or events in your community. You can sense the pride you have in your community. And I know that wherever there's going to be a new leader, but I know this, you will continue to represent your community well. And the one thing that I will say, because I told you this when we had a conversation the other day, and I want to thank you for that conversation. I also want to thank you for what you did in taking a little something off my plate. But I think all of us on this side, whether on this side or that side, are very familiar with what we refer to as the member from Prince George Valemount's death stare when she has you in her focus on a question being asked. So absolutely, will that member be asking questions in the House today, because we expect her to.
Leader of the third party.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, and I'm delighted to be able to add some words. Well-deserved praise to the member for Prince George Valemount and the Leader of the Official Opposition. And I'm going to be like Winnie the Pooh. I'm going to say what I see. And what I've seen in the last year has been, under the leadership of the member for Prince George Valemount, a caucus that has turned into a team, and a team that has purpose and vision and commitment to the work that they are doing as the official opposition. And I've been watching, and she may not know this, but seeing her as a mentor. And I think we haven't really recognized this, but for the first time in BC legislative history, there has been a moment when there were two women leaders of two parties. However, they weren't sitting in the House at the same time. This last year has been a year unlike any other in many ways, in that we have two women leaders of parties in this House. And my journey over this last year, particularly with the Leader of the Official Opposition, has been one from colleague to friend. And I am grateful for the conversations we have, the work we've done together, and for her steadfast commitment and fierce determination to serve her constituents and everybody in British Columbia. And I'm deeply grateful. Thank you.
It's hard to see so many good friends leaving us, retiring, or changing positions. I just want to say on behalf of all of us, thank you, each and every one of you, for your service. But don't worry about it. People like mighty Carol James will be back. Shirley, I would say, will be back, will stay with us and guide us, mentor us. So I want to say thank you, each and every one of you, for your service. Thank you. Honorable members, I would like to advise you of another upcoming retirement from the Legislative Assembly, that being of Greg Nelson. Greg joined the Legislative Assembly in 2006 after a 30-year policing career with the Saanich Police Department. He first served as a special constable with the Legislative Assembly Protective Services prior to assuming the role of training and liaison sergeant 2 years later. In that capacity, he served as the main investigator and contact for security and safety matters for all constituency offices and the legislative precinct. In June 2019, during a challenging period of time, Greg was appointed acting deputy sergeant at arms. A few months later, in October 2019, this House unanimously appointed him acting sergeant at arms, a position in which he served for 2 years until October of this year. Greg's steady hand and commitment to this institution through 15 years of loyal service have been most appreciated. Greg, on behalf of all members, we wish you the best in your next chapter of life. Thank you. Madam Clerk.
Statements by members.
Member for Surrey South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today, Thursday, November 25th, is International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. Not a nice topic. 1 in 3 girls and women endure physical or sexual violence in their lifetime. 603 million women live in countries where domestic violence is not yet considered a crime. Over 60 million girls worldwide are child brides married before the age of 18. Women and girls make up 80% of the estimated 800,000 people trafficked across national borders annually, and 79% of those are trafficked for sexual exploitation. Violence against women has increased since the start of the pandemic. Today will also launch the start of 16 days of activism. A woman who has been an activist not by choice, but driven by experience, is Kamal Dillon. She's the author of Black and Blue Sorry and I Am Kamal, Survivor to Thriver. She is a domestic violence survivor with a story to tell. Kamal survived multiple attempted murders, including hanging by her sari, dousing with kerosene, and electrocution with an arc welder. Kamal has had 10 jaw surgeries and now lives with an artificial jaw. What was meant to silence her has amplified her voice, a voice for change. She shares her story across Canada and the US on what it's like to be a victim and a survivor of domestic violence. These days, she candidly shares her story, giving talks to the RCMP, the Justice Institute, new recruits, mental health, and mental health providers. Through her speeches, and audiences discover the destructive grip of domestic violence and how that is inflicted and the strength required to break free. She is a positive example of how we do not have to be products of our circumstances. I thank her for her courage and perseverance to help raise awareness and put an end to the violence. Thank you.
Member for Surrey Panorama.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to talk today about Seva. Seva, selfless service, one of the tenets of the Sikh faith, and very much practiced in our community, and we've heard how much the Sikh community moves forward when help is needed. Within hours of the devastation that occurred last week, Gurdwaras, Dukhnawar and Guru Nanak and others commandeered volunteers, and they started to organize food and collect donations. These volunteers prepared 3,000 meals, collected supplies and chartered a helicopter to get the food to isolated communities within 24 hours. Paul Sekon has been on the ground at the Langley airport, tirelessly coordinating with food banks, Jewish and other religious groups, and community organizations to have donations delivered to the airport. From there, volunteers collect and load donations onto planes. Pilots and dispatchers have been flying 25 aircrafts and 4 helicopters continuously as weather permits, trying to deliver the goods to the affected areas. Donors have helped to cover the cost of fuel. West Coast Pilot Club, led by Sean Bradley, helps to coordinate. 30+ truckers have provided transportation. Gurpurab was last week, and Red FM, and this is an attestation to the whole community, South Asian community, especially the Sikh community, that they collected $955,000 that were donated to the Red Cross, and thank you to the community. World Financial Group, led by Arshveed Singh, donated $50,000. Akal Seva Foundation, Karnail Singh Rai, Rubinder Singh Rai, provided all kinds of goods. Buljit Gill is organizing hampers. Let us commit today, Mr. Speaker, to doing Seva, to help to build a more just and inclusive world.
Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to commemorate the start of Hanukkah this weekend. While this legislature will not sit again until long after the Jewish Festival of Lights has concluded, it's important for this House to recognize all those who will be celebrating at sundown this Sunday, marking the first night of Hanukkah. Hanukkah is the Festival of Lights, and it commemorates the hope and eventual triumph of the Jewish people in the face of great adversity and oppression. It is a time for all of us to honor and celebrate the strength and resilience of the Jewish people, as well as the important contributions the Jewish community has made here in British Columbia and around the world. Of course, within public health guidelines, Jewish families and friends will gather together for 8 nights, starting this weekend, to sing songs, spin the dreidel, devour delicious potato latke, and of course, light menorahs. And over those 8 cold days just ahead of the start of winter, the flames of these candles will bring warmth to people throughout British Columbia and remind us that light always triumphs over darkness, as does the spirit and tenacity of the Jewish people. I want to provide a special thank you to Andrew Reeve, one of our fantastic staff, for sharing the stories of how his family celebrates Hanukkah, and of course, for the special sweets he is sharing with us this afternoon. While the adjournment of this House tomorrow means that many of us won't be able to attend the official legislature menorah lighting in person this year, on behalf of the BC Liberal Caucus, I want to wish everyone marking this special occasion, whether on the front steps of this building or in homes and synagogues across the province, a very safe and happy Hanukkah. Hag Hanukkah Sameach.
Member for Abbotsford Mission.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would first like to acknowledge that I'm speaking to you from the traditional territories of the Lekwungen people, the Songhees, and Esquimalt First Nations. The flooding in the Fraser Valley has been a catastrophe of the highest order. We've all seen the pictures, watched the videos posted to social media, and continue to seek out the latest news, grim and shocking as it is. We're desperate to not only know more, but to somehow make sense of it all. However, I know now that you can never grasp the true impact of such a disaster until you stand in front of the loss and destruction it has left in its wake. 2 days ago, my colleague, the Honourable Member for Saanich South, as well as the Member for Delta South, joined Abbotsford's Mayor and me to meet with blueberry farmers and others to hear their stories and help us understand what was lost by these people and their families. In the midst of a crisis like this, it's easy to be overwhelmed by the constant stream of information, the reports, and the numbers. But how can any of us hope to really understand what is needed after a bleak event like this until we can sit face to face with the people who have suffered the most, the people we have pledged to serve? The bad news is that we're still trying to assess the depth and scope of what has been lost and how best we can respond. The good news is there was no sign of quitting for the people we spoke to, tired, frustrated, and anxious as they might be. The task ahead is monumental, but they are committed to rebuilding what was lost. I don't have all the answers to what comes next, but thanks to the empathy and openness we were shown, I now better understand the questions we are to ask as recovery begins. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Leader of the third party.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. The flooding that has devastated communities, destroyed infrastructure, taken lives, and added ever more uncertainty and unpredictability is absolutely a result of climate change. Today it is flooding. At the end of June it was a heat dome. Throughout the summer it was wildfires and then drought conditions that threatened water security, food security, and fish and wildlife habitat. We are in a climate-altered world. And we are experiencing not only weather-related disruptions that upend our lives, but grief that we don't even have time to sit with, much less process, because the relentless onslaught of emergencies won't allow us the time or space to consider what was lost before more losses accumulate. I feel it each time I look out our windows and see the cedar trees flagging, a grief for the loss that I can see unfolding in real time right in front of me, a grief for our beleaguered world, a world that we've collectively shown so little mercy for so many decades. I don't think there is anyone in this province not affected by the loss and destruction this year has delivered. The farmers returning to the devastation, the rescuing of stranded animals, the lives lost in the mudslide, it is overwhelmingly sad. Grief generates a lot of emotions: denial, anger, sadness. I cannot imagine getting to acceptance. I cannot accept that we are going to bequeath to our children and grandchildren this relentless loss and grief. Let us, as those in this province tasked with shaping the future, let us be fueled by this so that we will rise to the daunting and absolutely necessary challenge of treating climate change like an emergency, so that future British Columbians can look back and be grateful for our efforts rather than lament our inaction.
Member for Vernon-Monashee.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. On November 20, I had the great honour in participating in 100 days to the Games ceremonial torch lighting for the Greater Vernon 2022 BC Winter Games. This important milestone marked the final march towards BC Winter Games, which will be held in my home community of Vernon from February 24 till 27. This will be the first multi-support event of its kind since the start of the pandemic. I want to thank our government for providing financial support for the BC Winter Games as part of the more than $50 million invested in BC's support sector annually. Mr. Speaker, standing next to the Okanagan Indian Band Chief Byron Lewis and City of Vernon's Mayor Victor Cumming, along with community members, while we watch the inspirational youth athlete Riley Marchand carry the torch past our cheering community, it is a memory that I will hold dear to my heart. It was heartwarming to see our community safely coming together after we've been going through fires and now floods, and it was the ray of hope there. I want to acknowledge the tremendous efforts put forth by BC Games volunteers and staff. These events don't happen without months and months of planning, despite the obstacles and uncertainties over the past 20 months from COVID, fires, and floods. These folks have worked tirelessly, never losing the sight of their goal. They have had to pivot, change, and rewrite plans countless of times, but their dedication and passion shone through. I am confident that Greater Vernon 2022 BC Winter Games will be a great success. Mr. Speaker, I would also like to acknowledge the Vernon Winter Carnival Society, which invited the BC Games to participate in its torch lighting in Carnival's annual Light Up event. Please join me to thank everyone who made this event possible, despite what people in BC have gone through, and giving people something to look forward to. Thank you.
Madam Clerk.
Oral questions by members.
Member for Nechako Lakes.
Mr. Speaker, once again, there are hardworking families from the forest-dependent communities here in the gallery. And tragically, they've been telling us of people being laid off, companies about to close, and families being devastated. The Forest Minister's message of "don't worry, be happy" is not going over well with these families. The government admits their politically motivated policies will cost thousands of jobs, and yet the minister will not release the details to these families if their jobs will be lost. And now we have a doubling of the unjust and punitive duties, which will most assuredly cost more jobs in this province. Will the minister confirm how many jobs will be lost due to this double whammy?
Minister of Forests.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member for the question. And I too want to acknowledge the guests who are in the gallery today. And I do want to say that we are moving ahead with revitalizing the forest industry. We are doing it in a way that not only is going to protect old growth in this province, which is something that we've all agreed on. I think every person in this House agreed with the old growth strategic review that was tabled in this legislature last year. I think everybody agreed with, as the majority of the province agree, that we need to do something, and we need to ensure that we are protecting those rare and iconic trees from irreversible loss. We have also committed to working with Indigenous nations, another part of our visions for forestry, and we are committed to doing that. And we are committed to working with communities, with workers, with industry to bring our forest industry into the 21st century. We will have supports in place for workers. We will have supports in place for families. We will have supports in place for communities. We know what it's like. I lived through the times when the former member was in the government and there was thousands and thousands of jobs lost without supports in place. I know what it's like to live in a forest-dependent community. I know what it's like to be in a family where 4 generations have worked in the forest industry. I get it. I understand the grief. I understand the concerns. We will be there for people.
Member from Nechako Lakes, supplemental.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, quite frankly, refusing to provide the basic information provides no comfort to these families. These hardworking men and women in one of the foundational industries of this province deserve better. First, we've seen this politically motivated policy with no analysis about the cost to jobs across this province. And as the USW Local 1-1937 President Brian Butler says, and I quote, "Quite frankly, they've sold out forest workers," end quote. And now, having access to the largest market denied by Americans, which we know is going to cost British Columbians jobs, and this government has done nothing. To the Minister, how many jobs? Where is the analysis? Or do you just prefer to leave these families with a bleak Christmas?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And what I prefer to do is not to fearmonger. I prefer to... I think.
Continue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We have been clear that when we talked about the deferrals, we are looking at 2.6 million hectares that potentially could be deferred. We are talking about potential job losses. If every area was to be deferred in the new year, we would expect about 4,500 jobs to be lost. We have been very clear about that. That is a potential for job losses. It's not 18,000. It's not hundreds of thousands. It is 4,500 jobs could potentially be lost. And
Members,
we will.
Minister will continue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We have been very clear with that, and we will have supports in place. We have also been very clear with that. We will have supports in place for workers. We will have supports in place for communities, for industry, and we have had industry reaching out to us. We have had industry who have said to us that we understand the direction that you're moving in. We understand your vision. We agree it is time to bring the forest industry into the 21st century, something that shouldn't. This is something that should have been done years ago, and it hasn't been done.
Thank you. Member for Abbotsford West.
Thanks, Honourable Chair. Well, if the Minister thinks that the people in the gallery today take any comfort whatsoever from her throwing out figures and trying to minimize the impact of her government's policies in the absence of providing any documentation or analysis whatsoever, I've got news for her. They don't take any comfort from that. They will leave here justifiably concerned, more concerned. She said we're fear-mongering. Well, you know, yesterday the Minister wouldn't even stand up and confirm on the record that the tariffs were being doubled. She couldn't bring herself to provide that level of information. Here's something else she probably doesn't want to acknowledge. Last week, an analysis from the RBC, from the capital markets, here's what they are saying about the policies that she and her government are embarking upon. Implications of British Columbia harvest deferrals. The impact is clearly negative for the BC forest industry. The ongoing forest industry exodus will only accelerate. We suspect that sawmills will pull back on local investments given the uncertain future of forestry in BC. The province has already moved from a low-cost producer to by far the highest cost region in North America. And the unfortunate thing is that less lumber will make it more challenging to grow the value-added applications such as mass timber, given that lumber costs will be far higher than other regions. Now, are they fear-mongering as well? That's an analysis that says this minister and this government's policies are putting those people out of work. How many more forest-dependent families are going to lose their jobs because of the policies being advanced by this minister and this government?
Minister of Forests.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And we know that our forests have a special place for people in British Columbia, but we also know that we need to manage our forests differently. We need to ensure that we have a forest industry for generations to come, but also have a forest industry for people today. We need to ensure that we are protecting our forests, those that are at risk of irreversible loss. We have to ensure we're protecting them. We have to ensure we have supports in place, and we are doing all of that. We are going to do it, and we are going to continue to do it. And I can continue to say it, but we are also acting on it. We are also working with Indigenous nations. We are working with industry. We are working with workers. We are going to reaching out to communities. We are doing that work to ensure that there are minimal effects, because we know what it is like. We know what it is like to lose jobs and not have any support. We know what it is like to lose jobs and not have a transition to retirement, not to have any support, to get some training so that you could learn something else. We know what that is like. Mr. Speaker, we will have those supports in place, and I will say it today and I will say it again. We will have supports in place.
Member for Abbotsford West, supplementary.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. Well, I got news for the minister if she doesn't get this. The people here today, they don't want a bridge to retirement. They want to work in the forest sector in British Columbia. And all the minister can say is you're fear-mongering. Well, here's the good news. One of the flagship forestry companies in British Columbia yesterday announced a $500 million investment. It's great news. Except they made the investment in Ontario and Quebec, Mr. Speaker. They didn't invest in BC. They made the investment there, and listen to the numbers. Oh, the members got lots of things to say. You should go out and talk to these people after the session.
Minister, members.
One of British Columbia's flagship forest companies, in response to the policies introduced and advanced by this government, the absence of a softwood lumber agreement, Interfor's production will be as follows. 62% of the lumber they now produce will be from their US operations, 20% will be from Eastern Canada, and 18% will be from British Columbia. That's one of our flagship forest companies. Surely the minister isn't proud of those numbers, and that trend is going to continue. The people here in the gallery today want to know the details. They want to know how many of their jobs this government, this minister, are prepared to sacrifice on the altar of misguided policies.
Minister of Forests.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm glad the member referred to misguided policies, because that was the misguided policies under their government that led Interfor to do the investments across the line. As did a number of other companies. I have talked to Interfor. I understand they have been working on this transition for some years now. Did not just happen. It did not just happen because of our forest policies. They were very clear of that. And they are continuing to invest in BC. They are continuing to upgrade their plants. They are committed to British Columbia. They are committed to their workers. So the member has his information wrong. He should get his facts straight.
Order.
We hear
members.
We hear every day
members
of companies.
Will come to order.
Mr. Speaker, I'm talking to companies, I'm talking to industry. They are continuing to want to invest in BC. They are committed to BC, and they are committed to workers. We are working together to bring the forest industry into the 21st century, something that government should have started years ago.
Leader of the third party.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Earlier this week, the second quarterly report of the province's finances was released. It showed a deficit that wasn't as big as expected and a growing inflation rate. The report also showed that so far this year, BC has brought in $1.8 billion from the property transfer tax. That means that each time a house is purchased in BC, a slice of that profits the provincial government. And $1.8 billion is a lot of money. In fact, it's more than what has been raised in actual property taxes, which amounts to $1.5 billion. BC is in a housing crisis, and a large part of that is due to the fact that we treat housing as a commodity, an investment. Housing is a way to make money, not a way to shelter families and communities. Housing prices for all types have increased by 17.1% this year. So a home that would have sold for $800,000 last year would now go for $936,000. And by taking a cut of that growth in the property transfer tax, the government is profiting from the housing crisis. It's profiting a lot. Through you, Honourable Speaker, to the Minister of Finance, the provincial coffers are expected to profit to the tune of $3 billion from the property transfer tax this year, but such a large reliance on a single revenue stream is, to quote the minister herself, a risk. What is the minister doing to diversify provincial revenues?
Attorney General and Minister of Housing.
Thank you very much, Honourable Speaker, and thank you to the member for the question. I think housing is one of the most important issues facing our province. Our government has taken a number of steps to address speculation in the housing market. We put in place the speculation tax, which was an innovative and a brand new tax, actually under former Finance Minister Carol James, who's in the House here today. A remarkable and critical tax to say housing is not an investment. Housing is for people to live in. I noticed the members on the other side oppose that tax, continue to oppose it in their leadership debates. I hope they don't sit on this side to bring speculation back in the same way. We supported interventions to force the other government when they were in power to limit foreign investment in our housing market. We'll continue those measures. It is a risk to be dependent on this. I know the member's not suggesting we get rid of that tax, but we're trying really hard to shift housing into a situation where the supply that we have in the province meets the demand. We had about 50,000 new British Columbians move to this province because of the opportunities that are here. We need the housing to support them. That's why we're working with municipalities, the Minister for Municipal Affairs. That's why BC Housing has $2 billion going to workforce housing from this government as we build the housing.
Leader of the third party supplemental.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, and thank you to the Attorney General, Minister for Housing, for that response. However, what I'm asking about is diversifying provincial revenues. While the province makes billions of dollars, 1 in 3 renters are worried about making next month's rent. BC has the highest rent in the country. Homelessness is on the rise. It takes the average British Columbian 35 years to save for a down payment. Racial inequality is being exacerbated. We're in a housing crisis, and this government is profiting from it with zeal. It looks like a conflict of interest to have a government making billions off a crisis they're supposed to be addressing. Our over-reliance on the revenue generated from the unsustainable housing market makes us vulnerable, especially as we use it to fund recovery from severe weather events that we're facing all year. Through you, Honourable Speaker, again to the Minister of Finance, we need to have the confidence that this government is taking seriously the responsibility to diversify BC's economy. What is the minister doing to diversify provincial revenue streams?
Attorney General.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. We are in the midst of the largest in-migration to British Columbia in 30 years, the Minister of Jobs just advised me. 30 years. So the member wants to talk about diversifying the economy. What better evidence of how we're building an economy that works for everybody than people voting with their feet and coming to British Columbia? And we need to have the housing ready for them. We need municipalities to be building the supply that's there. BC Housing's partnering with them. The Minister for Municipal Affairs is working with them to expedite approvals processes, and it is working. The member suggesting that we're not acting on this, I don't understand it. As of April 2017, the previous government had about 2,000 units of affordable housing under construction or in development. As of February 2021, 19,108 units our government has. We have rental housing under construction at record levels, as we have for the past 3 years in the province. Since the introduction of the speculation tax, 18,000 previously vacant homes back on the market as rental homes. We're doing the work, Honourable Speaker, but there's a lot more to do.
Member for Kamloops South Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Documents obtained under FOI reveal that the Minister of Citizen Services undertook a sham of a consultation into hiding information from the public. On March 31st, 2021, the Minister received Cabinet approval to gut Freedom of Information. Her caucus briefing notes confirm that every key element was decided before consulting with the Privacy Commissioner, before consulting with the public, and before consulting with the Indigenous peoples. So my question to the Minister of Citizen Services is this: why did the Minister decide that she would gut FOI before consulting with Indigenous peoples, public, and other key stakeholders?
Minister of Citizen Services.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, and I want to thank the member for the question. So the Freedom of Information and Privacy Protection Act has not been updated since 2011. The legislation is outdated and it's not serving the needs of British Columbians. We've been contemplating changes to the FOIPA Act since 2017. There's been consultation ongoing since then, 2018, 2019, 2020, and 2021. We've been listening to people. It is our role as government to listen to what's going on in people's lives. We've been hearing from businesses, from public bodies, from universities, from health authorities, from the tech sector, that the current legislation is out of date and that it wasn't serving the needs. It's not allowing them to be competitive, and it's not allowing them to provide the services.
Minister, continue.
Thank you. And it's not allowing them to provide the services that people have come to count on during COVID-19. We had to implement a ministerial order so that people were able to FaceTime with their doctors, or so that we could use Google Classrooms. It's these types of important services that are embedded in the amendments in our legislation we have before us today that will allow us to continue serving British Columbians, allow them to keep accessing the services that they have come to expect and that they rely on. Thank you.
Member for West Vancouver, Capilano.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Through FOI, the NDP's own decision note has revealed what many have suspected about their secret agenda for childcare. Bigger government, more bureaucracy, and
members, let's listen to the question, please. Members,
order. Bigger government, more bureaucracy, and bad results for families. Romazelle April Kennedy is a landed immigrant who has invested her family's life savings into children childcare centres that serve over 250 parents in Surrey. And she says, these are her words, quote, 90% of my 60 women workforce are members of a visible minority. The NDP is not only risking my livelihood, but that of all these minority women. I plan to open new spaces for over 400 families, but today I have to cancel these plans. Surrey needs these spaces, and it is shameful that families will be hurt by these unjustified changes, end quote. So, Mr. Speaker, will the minister explain why she is threatening the childcare spaces of these 250 families and tens of thousands of families across BC?
Minister of Children and Family Development.
Thank you very much. Honourable Speaker, for years, the members opposite neglected childcare. They left families to fend for themselves. Honourable Speaker, families in my community have a long commute to work, but because there were so few childcare spaces, they had to commute for childcare and then commute for work. That's bad for the economy, it's bad for the environment, and it's bad for quality family life. Honourable Speaker, since 2018, nearly 26,000 new licensed childcare spaces have been funded. That is the fact.
Minister, take a seat. Shall we continue? Minister will continue.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. That's the fastest childcare space creation in BC's history. We have funded more than double the number of spaces that the opposition funded in 16 years. Honourable Speaker, I have families coming to me in tears because they're now able to access childcare. That means they have better quality of life and they're able to go to work. And so we will continue investing in childcare.
Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we began this session asking about how 600 frail, elderly British Columbians died in a heat dome. Through an FOI, we discovered the NDP had been warned about the dangers. We've asked about the delays and frustrations the residents of Lytton are feeling as they try to rebuild their lives after a devastating fire. And we hoped that the government would have learned lessons from these tragedies. But then the floods hit, and it was clear that many of the same mistakes were being made again. British Columbians expect us to work together at times like this, and that is exactly what both opposition parties asked to do. We can do better, and we must. So will this government commit today to an all-party committee to review and improve British Columbia's emergency response?
Minister of Public Safety.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, and I appreciate the question from the member. And there is absolutely no doubt that the past 20 months have been more challenging than just about at any other period in the province's history. But if there's one thing that we have seen during that time is British Columbians coming together to get through these challenges, whether it is communities pulling together, whether it's emergency services pulling together, whether it is all of us getting through pandemics, getting through floods, getting through fires, and we will continue to do that. In terms of our response and how we deal with that, we know that there are challenges ahead as we are facing climate change and the reality of that and the impacts, and we've seen that in fires, we've seen that in floods. It's one of the reasons why since 2017, we started to make changes to do just that. It's why we're undergoing the largest overhaul of the Emergency Protection Act in this province's history since it was introduced in 1993. That work has been ongoing for more than a year and will continue to ongo, with legislation expected in the fall of this year, or sorry, the fall of next year. The leader has raised questions about alerting, and I've said also in this House, there are going to be significant improvements in terms of our capacity online for next summer. There is additional work that will no doubt have to be done. And it may well involve the ability of all members of this House to participate through committees to work on some of those issues. But what I can tell you, the priority of government right now is to ensure the well-being of British Columbians impacted by these disasters, to work on the recovery, to get this province up and running as quickly as possible, as soon as possible, and as safely as possible.
Leader of the Official Opposition, supplemental.
Well, thank you very much, and I don't think there is a single person in this House or probably in British Columbia that would disagree that British Columbians are resilient. They've come together in times of crisis that include wildfires, they include a heat dome, floods, you name it, British Columbians came together. What is astounding to me is the fact that there is such reluctance or fear to actually do things differently in this legislature. I have no idea why the government resists the offers of both opposition parties to step up and behave in a way that shows British Columbians we are prepared to tackle tough issues together. And let's look at why that might be even more important to members on the government side, because in the mandate letters to every single cabinet minister on that side of the House, it says, and I quote, "That means seeking out, fostering, and championing good ideas regardless of their origin," end quote. Those are the words of the Premier of British Columbia. And it's not just floods, and the minister knows that. When we think about reconciliation, it is one of the most significant challenges of our time. And all of us were devastated when we learned of the confirmation of unmarked graves, not just in Kamloops, but across our province and country. And even more devastating when we think about what we could do together. In British Columbia today, an average of 6 people die as a result of an opioid crisis. It is a crisis that is unprecedented in our province. The leader of the third party and myself, months ago, said to this government, we want to work with you across party lines. How on earth could that be seen in a negative light? The Premier said that means seeking out, fostering, and championing good ideas regardless of their origin. Look across the aisle. It's time to show British Columbians we can actually do business differently. We can be better together, and we must be. So, to the Deputy Premier, when will the government recognize the importance of sending that message to British Columbians, especially at times like this? Whether it's related to the pathway to reconciliation or to deal with the opioid crisis in British Columbia, we call on the government today, both opposition parties. We want to work across party lines on those two critical issues, as well as look at emergency response. Will the government honor the Premier's words and ensure that we can work together across party lines?
Government House Leader.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, and I thank the member for that question. I think all of us in this chamber want to ensure that we are doing everything we can to address the crises that we face. And there is amazing work being done right across this province by British Columbians of all political persuasions, from all walks of life. And there's amazing work being done in this House on cross-party lines on a daily basis. There is significant cooperation that takes place. And in touring disaster sites, for example, whether it has been fires or in floods, we have brought along members of the opposition. And there's a serious question the member raised, and I really appreciate it. But I will also remind members, particularly new members on that side of the House, there was a time when you guys sat on this side and you didn't do things like that. Yes, it is.
Members,
and
we'll listen to the answer.
And I only say that not to be the focus of my response, but to make this point. Absolutely, there are opportunities for cross-party cooperation.
Members, we heard you already.
And if
That's
you
enough.
And if you listen to my answer to the first question, you would have heard me say, I think there is opportunity to do just that. And I don't see any reason why we cannot do more.
Member for Cadieux North. Every member will come to order.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker.
Continue.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, because when committees are put together, they are done in the context of terms of reference, in terms of a project, you know, Honourable Speaker, it's pretty clear. I'm trying to tell them that, yeah, there's opportunities, but what I'm getting is sort of partisan rhetoric back, which tells me that, you know what? This is the last day of this session. There will be opportunities for committees to be struck when we come back to the House in February, and I look forward to it.
The bell ends question period. Attorney General.
Honourable Speaker, I rise to table the Civil Resolution Tribunal Annual Report for 2020-21.
Madam Clerk, member from the Chaco Lakes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to table a petition signed by 411 people concerned about the intersection of Lloyd Drive with Highway 16. And along with this petition is testimonials about all the risks that are associated with that intersection for the minister's benefit.
Madam Clerk. Government House Leader.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. I seek leave to table the 2022 parliamentary calendar, something I know which is of great interest to members.
Is leave granted? Proceed.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. The parliamentary calendar for 2022 and just as we've been talking about cooperation, it is early this year that I am tabling it, but we will start on February the 8th, and the session will conclude on the 2nd of June for members' information. And yes, spring break will be in the calendar.
Madam Clerk.
Orders of the day.
Government House Leader.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Just before I move, noting the hour, I would just like to remind people, I usually do it later in the day, and that is to remind members to clean out their desks so that the hardworking staff here do not have to do that. And with that, Honourable Speaker, I move the House to now adjourn.
Members, you heard the motion. All those in favour indicate aye. Opposed? Motion carried. This House stands adjourned until 1 p.m. today.